to a little dog talk on a Tuesday night here on Dogs on Demand on Facebook and Instagram. You can check us out also at our great website, dogsondemand.com. Our program tonight brought to you by Southeast Mortgage, the official home loan lender of the Georgia Bulldogs. Next time you're ready to finance or refinance your home, let me give you a little word of advice. Check out Southeast Mortgage. Those are great folks. They know what they're doing. They are professional. They are very personal as well. They'll sit down with you and talk with you and try to figure out what is the best way to go about doing what you want to do. The folks at Southeast Mortgage are just great folks, and they're great supporters of the University of Georgia Bulldogs. And so be sure to check them out. Southeast Mortgage, the official home loan lender of the Georgia Bulldogs. And it is great to be a Georgia Bulldog these days. Chris Hall with you on a Tuesday night. We're going to talk a little bit about Georgia and Samford. Also talk a little bit about Georgia and South Carolina and some other very interesting things having to do with football, especially in the SEC. Kind of a turbulent weekend or before week 2 of college football. Some major upsets. We'll kind of talk about them just very briefly and then look forward to the schedule this coming weekend. If you'd like to come in and share your comment or your question, you can do that. Just zip us a line and we'd love to hear from you. But it's a Tuesday night. As you can see behind us, Sanford Stadium. It was rocking on Saturday. A good crowd showed up, obviously. A capacity crowd for Georgia and Samford. Not a lot of attention paid to winning the national championship. Now, obviously, that was done in the stadium itself, but it was like, Coach Smart and the team was saying, okay, we won the national championship. That is behind us. Now we're ready to move forward and let's do it again. And so Georgia was all business as Georgia took on Samford this past weekend. We were there and we watched the game, obviously. And Georgia was not as sharp as they were against Oregon, just not really sharp, especially offensively, as the Bulldogs were against Oregon. But nonetheless, still had a good, productive game. Really kind of a tune-up game, getting ready for the SEC schedule. And, of course, the SEC schedule will begin this coming Saturday as Georgia takes on South Carolina, the Gamecocks, in Columbia. That'll be a 12 noon kickoff game. It'll be on ESPN, and we'll talk about that in just a few moments. But probably by now you have already heard in the Associated Press top 25 poll, Georgia now is the new number 1 ranked team in the country. The poll came out yesterday or Sunday, I believe, Sunday afternoon. And so Georgia is the new number 1, replacing Alabama. Alabama, of course, having that scare against Texas and Austin. And, what a game. I was in Athens at the Georgia game, not able to see the game. Did watch a lot of the highlights when, we got back home and watched it. What a game. I had picked Alabama to win very handily, as most people had. But hello, it didn't exactly happen. And so Texas really gave Alabama all they could handle. Alabama looked very pedestrian. Hey, Controllus, good to have you with us tonight. Alabama looked very, very pedestrian. And so Alabama now no longer the number 1 team in the land. It is now the University of Georgia. So let's run down the top 10 right quick from the AP Top 25 poll. Georgia, number 1. Alabama, number 2. Ohio State, number 3. Michigan, 4. Clemson, number 5. Oklahoma University, number 6. USC, number 7. Oklahoma State, number 8. And look at here, the University of Kentucky, coming off that big win against Florida, comes in at number 9 in the country, and Arkansas is number 10. Other SEC teams coming into the top 25, you have Tennessee at 15, you have Florida at 18, Ole Miss number 20, and Texas A&M. My. You pay $1.5 million to a Sunbelt school that you made fun of at your big pep rally. You pay them $1.5 million to come in and whoop you and send you tumbling down in the polls. So Georgia number 1, Alabama number 2, Ohio State 3, right now Michigan 4, Clemson 5. We have a question from Lewis. He wants to know, do you think Alabama has a chance in the national championship game? And yes, Lewis, they do. Alabama is still a very good team, and they did not play their best game by any means. I imagine in Tuscaloosa this week, it was a little tough at practice. Nick Saban probably really got the attention of the guys this week in Tuscaloosa. Alabama just did not play well at all. And to be honest with you, Texas kind of laid out a blueprint now for how you attack that Alabama team if you can do it. And you attack that team by going right at their offensive line. Again, offensive line problems for the University of Alabama. You just pack it in there. You put a lot of pressure on that offensive line, a lot of stunts, a lot of blitzes. That's what Texas did, and Alabama had a hard time with it. But Alabama, of course, winning 20-19. We'll talk about that game a little later on. Now, Georgia, the new number 1 team in the country, and now turns its attention to South Carolina. South Carolina losing the game last week against Arkansas in Fayetteville by a score of 44-30. South Carolina losing their first, and they lost some other things as well we'll talk about in their first game against Arkansas. So the game will be this coming Saturday at 12 noon. It'll be Georgia traveling to Columbia, South Carolina, Williams-Brice Stadium in Columbia, South Carolina. The game will be on ESPN, so it's one of those 12 noon games, which is not our favorite. And, it's not our favorite, but it is what it is. And so you have Georgia and South Carolina. Georgia coming in, and it was projected today. Georgia has opened up significantly now. Georgia is a road favorite over South Carolina this week. Georgia is favored to beat South Carolina by 24.5 points. So pretty significant, pretty heavy, underdog for South Carolina against Georgia. Of course, we all remember this very well. Unfortunately, it was 3 years ago when an unranked South Carolina team stunned top 5 ranked Georgia in Sanford Stadium. That was a noon kickoff as well. So we all remember that. Hope that nothing like that, even rears its ugly head to repeat. So Georgia and South Carolina this coming Saturday, again, 12 noon, Columbia, South Carolina. It'll be on ESPN. And again, Georgia now is 24.5 point favorites over South Carolina. Some other things we have about Georgia. Let's talk a little bit about the production of Georgia so far offensively. Georgia's offense hitting on all cylinders against Oregon, not quite as sharp against Samford. In fact, as I was watching that game, I was thinking to myself, and I think to myself a lot, I was thinking to myself, the Samford team maybe could give Oregon a fit, defensively at least. Now, offensively, Samford, really had no shot to do anything against the Bulldogs, but defensively, the Samford Bulldogs came to play, and they gave Georgia, a good fit here and there. And so, it was a good game. But Steve wants to know, should we be concerned about the drops? I don't think so. I think we're going to be. I think Georgia will be okay. See, here's the scenario for Saturday. You want to go in there and just take control of the game immediately. You don't want to give South Carolina any kind of hope that they have a shot. Now, South Carolina has a shot. They're an SEC team. They are at home. And Georgia, and I'm sure Coach Smart has emphasized this, you can't go in there thinking, all you have to do is throw your helmet on the field and, this game is over. That can't be. You play an SEC opponent on the road, and I don't care who you're playing, be it Vanderbilt or whoever. You've got to take care of business. And Georgia, you will have to go in there and take control of the game immediately, and I suspect that they will. Here's the offensive production by individuals so far for Georgia. Stetson Bennett, just a marvelous two first games. He's passed in those two first games for 668 passing yards. That's 334 yards a game, 3 touchdowns, and no interceptions. By the way, Stetson Bennett now is number 4 on the list for potential Heisman Trophy winners. They have these odds and this formula where they figure out this thing of who's the favorite to win the Heisman Trophy. Well, Stetson, my man, the mailman, has been delivering, and he's out now. He's like a plus. I have 1,400, which I don't really understand the formula, but that makes him the 4th best favorite to win the Heisman Trophy for this year. So Stetson continues to play at a very high level. Kendall Milton, rushing, has 18 carries, 135 yards. He's averaging 67.5 yards per game. Kendall has scored 1 touchdown, 1 receiving touchdown as well, and he's caught passes for 18 yards, 9 yards per game. Dejon Edwards has done well. Kenny McIntosh, Ladd McConkey, Brock Bowers. Brock so far has 5 receptions in 2 games for 95 yards, averaging 47.5 yards per game. So the Bulldogs are averaging 525 yards in total offense per game. So that ranks Georgia the 10th best nationally. By the way, Stetson Bennett now is 31 yards away from becoming the 8th Georgia quarterback to reach 5,000 career passing yards. I mean, the dude just keeps delivering. Stetson Bennett. The Bulldogs defense, it was anticipated that the defense is going to have this big drop off from last year. Well, obviously somewhere down the line that probably will happen. You can't lose all that talent that Georgia had and expect to just stay at that high level where the Bulldogs were. But so far, so good for the Georgia defense. Georgia leads the nation in scoring defense, giving up 1.5 points a game. Now, if you do that, that's like a baseball defense. If you do that, you're going to do okay. Georgia ranks 8th in total defense, giving up 220.5 yards per game. And Georgia's defense is tied for 6th in the fewest first downs allowed, and that is 12 per game. So Georgia defensively continues to hit on all cylinders. Now, we thought it might be a challenge when Georgia took on Oregon. Oregon, obviously not quite as strong as we anticipated them being. Samford, we felt like Samford would be, a team that obviously the Bulldogs could handle, and obviously they did. Samford really could do nothing offensively. And so I think a big test for the Georgia Bulldogs, obviously, is going to be coming up this Saturday when Georgia takes on South Carolina. It's an SEC game, and I'm telling you, when you play an SEC game and you play away and you play in their stadium with that atmosphere, South Carolina's coming off a loss to Arkansas, but still, those fans and those stands will be sky high, just hoping that South Carolina can do something against Georgia. South Carolina was carved up for 295 yards and 5 touchdowns on the ground against Arkansas. Arkansas really had a great running game against South Carolina. South Carolina very weak against the running game. Arkansas racked up 20 of its first 28 first downs by the rushing attack. The Gamecocks are allowing 247.5 yards, rushing yards per game. That ranks currently 129th nationally out of 131 teams. So you would think that Georgia would have the opportunity to get the ground game going against South Carolina. South Carolina quarterback Spencer Rattler, he's doing pretty good, having a pretty good season, has completed 61.8% of his throws. He has 603 yards in passing in the first 2 games for South Carolina. 2 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. Now, the unfortunate thing for South Carolina is that South Carolina lost 2 defensive starters on Saturday against Arkansas. Jordan Strakan and middle linebacker Mo Kaba were both injured. In fact, they both suffered season ending ACL injuries against Arkansas. So, that's going to put a big hole in that defense that already is a little porous for South Carolina. I look for some gadget stuff coming out of South Carolina. I look for, some different things from South Carolina to try to shake up the game and shake up the Bulldogs. But Georgia hopefully will just settle down, play their game, and Georgia should come out of Columbia with a big win. We'll have to wait and see. Georgia, we'll deal with it with it when it comes. Some reports out of Georgia: receiver Arian Smith is still dealing with a high ankle sprain. He has been running at practice, but it's not determined yet when Arian Smith, the receiver for Georgia, will be back on the field. Kirby Smart said today that it will not be this week. So Arian Smith, one of the top receivers for the University of Georgia, dealing with a high ankle sprain, still dealing with that. Also, A.D. Mitchell had an ankle injury on the first play of the game for Georgia on Saturday against Samford. Coach Smart said today, hopefully, that Mitchell will be able to play against South Carolina. Ron Corson, the athletic trainer, is optimistic that A.D. Mitchell will be able to go against the Gamecocks. So here we go. We're going to Columbia. That's kind of a wild place. South Carolina would love to knock off Georgia, the new number one team in the country. It's going to be a slobber knocker, as we say in South Georgia. Should be a good game. And hey, go Dogs. Let's keep it going. A new number one team in the country. Now, a couple of stats for you. Georgia is the only FBS team that has not allowed a touchdown through the first two games of the season. So there you go. Defensively, Georgia still, has not allowed a touchdown in the first two games of the season. Here's another stat for you. The SEC East has four teams now ranked in the AP top 20. The SEC East has kind of been on the outside looking in when it comes to the SEC West. But right now, the SEC East, and mind you, the SEC West still strong. Both conference, both divisions of the SEC still strong. But currently, the SEC seems like the East seems like it may be, saying, okay, it's our turn here. And Georgia is number one. Florida's in there. Kentucky, Tennessee look prime for big years. So the SEC East making a comeback. And it's, Georgia's going to have to negotiate all of that. So let's take a look at some of the scores from last week. I'm sure you've heard about them. We'll just kind of hit on them right quick and talk a little bit about them. Alabama beat Texas 20-19. Texas obviously better than what people anticipated. Alabama really showed some weaknesses in their team. Some of the weaknesses were exposed for Alabama. I'm sure Coach Saban is going to be working to deal with those things. He and his staff, obviously a very good staff. So we should look for Alabama to make a bounce back. They won the game. That's, for Alabama fans, that's what they wanted, but they did not want it to be that close, a last second field goal or a last minute field goal for Alabama. And so Alabama beats Texas 2019. Kansas State just whipped Missouri 40-12. And that's a little disappointing. You thought Missouri may go into Kansas State and, play a little better than that. So obviously, Missouri showed a lot of weakness in their game on Saturday. Arkansas beating South Carolina 44-30. Arkansas is legit. Strong team, now in the top 10 in the AP poll of college football. Vanderbilt lost to Wake Forest 45-25. Do you know, and how do you I just, how do you explain this? I'm still at a loss for words. Texas A&M was ranked the number 6 team in the country. Now they're number 25. Texas A&M loses to Appalachian State 17-14. And just how? I mean, how did that possibly happen? Now Appalachian State, they took, what was it, North Carolina? Should have beat North Carolina. Appalachian State. By the way, they have no 5-star and no 4 stars. I think no 4 or 5-star recruits on their team. They're just very well coached up. Texas A&M loses 17-14 to Appalachian State, and the Big South Conference had a big day on Saturday. As Marshall goes in to beat Notre Dame. So I just inexplicably, just how does that happen? And the heat has kind of been turned up a little bit on our good friend, the coach for Texas A&M, and so I just still at a loss for words. What in the world happened in College Station? Boy, the Tennessee-Pittsburgh game was a great game. Tennessee winning 34-27. Georgia obviously beating Samford 33-0. Ole Miss took out Central Arkansas 59-3. The Kentucky-Florida game was a great game. I listened to that game while I was on my way home from Athens. And, I'm like everybody else. I'm saying, okay, Kentucky, they have the hype. Every year they say, well, we got a good team. Even the basketball coach, Don Calipari at Kentucky, he may not be a believer in the football team at Kentucky. If you heard, his comments about Kentucky being a basketball school, I was like everybody else. Kentucky will go in there. Florida, a big win over Utah. And then the quarterback they got, everybody's going gaga over him, and Florida was a favorite, and then Kentucky goes in there and just manhandles Florida, just manhandles the Gators in the swamp. It may have been expected by some other people, but it was not expected by me. But Kentucky, you go, Big Blue. A big win over Florida. Auburn beat San Jose State 24-16. What? Do I think Jimbo Fisher watched that game after his? No, I think Jimbo Fisher was in the corner crying somewhere. Anyway, Auburn beat San Jose State 24-16. LSU beat Southern University, both of those teams in Baton Rouge, 65 rather to 17. So LSU getting on the winning track, beating Southern University. And then out west, you had Mississippi State beating Arizona 39-17. That was a late game out west. So that was the SEC results from last weekend. Some other notable games, and boy, were there some other notable games. Marshall beat Notre Dame 26-21. Now, I was in the stadium in Athens, sitting about right over there somewhere. Anyway, I was in the stadium in Athens, and when that final score went up on the big board that Marshall had beaten Notre Dame, there was a huge applause and expressions of joy from the Georgia faithful. We all pull for Notre Dame to lose as many as we can, but Marshall, Marshall got $1.4 million for going in to play Notre Dame. By the way, Samford got $500,000, I think, for the game against Georgia. These smaller schools, these schools out of the lower division, they go to play the big boys so they can get money for their program. People say, well, why do they do that? Why would Samford want to play Georgia? Well, it's competitive. They want their guys to play against the best that college football has to offer. But also it's a financial, it's a financial a payday for these schools. And so, Sanford got $500,000. Hey, Miss Regina, how you doing? I agree with you. Go Dogs. Um, so anyway, Marshall goes in and beats Notre Dame 26-21. Also on Saturday, BYU beat Baylor 26-20. Baylor was the number 9 ranked team in the country when that happened. BYU, Brigham Young University, beat Baylor in 2 overtimes, 26-20. And then another, I mean, you're almost flabbergasted, whatever that means. You just, Georgia Southern goes into Lincoln, Nebraska and beats Nebraska. Georgia Southern, good program, good football team. Clay Helton, former coach at USC, now coaching at Georgia Southern. Georgia Southern goes in and beats Nebraska 45-42. Georgia Southern was a 24-point underdog. Remember that number. South Carolina is a 24-point underdog to Georgia. Say, just don't take anything for granted. Go in there and have at it. But Georgia Southern beats Nebraska and gets the coach fired for Nebraska. He's out. And he's an alumni, bless his heart, of the University of Nebraska. But Scott Frost is out as the coach. And, you hate you don't want to celebrate anybody getting sacked or anything like that. Hey, Charles, what's happening, my man? Indeed, go Dogs. But Georgia Southern out of Statesboro, Georgia, wins over Nebraska and gets the coach fired. There you go. What? I get sinuses or something. Yeah, my pipes are a little clogged. I don't know. It's the change of seasons. My producer's saying, "What's wrong with you? Talk better." Okay, I'm trying. Other upsets from Saturday: Washington State beat number 19 Wisconsin 17-14. Kansas beat West Virginia 55-42. And that's I was upset. Texas Tech beat Houston. Now Texas Tech was not ranked. Houston, traveled to Texas Tech. Where they play? Okay. Anyway, Texas Tech beat Houston 33-30. So, a lot of upsets around the country. It was a wild day in college football this past Saturday. By the way, and we don't get anything from these guys other than pure entertainment. But SEC shorts, they do these little skits. They do them based on SEC football teams and what's happening with the football teams. And whoever wrote this thing had to write it like immediately after the games on Saturday. I don't know when they taped it, but listen, go to secshorts.com and look at their latest little video about the SEC teams and some of the sufferings of Alabama and Texas A&M and and some of these teams. They're hilarious. We get nothing from them, but check it out. Let's see. All right, here's the SEC schedule for this coming weekend. We know Georgia and South Carolina, 12 noon ESPN. Youngstown State against Kentucky on the SEC network. That'll be at 12 noon. Now, you expect Kentucky to win, but will they have a letdown after that big win in the Swamp? Youngstown State perennially has a good football team. They're in the lower division of college football, but you can't sleep on those guys. Abilene Christian will take on Missouri on the SEC Plus network. That'll be at 12 noon. Ole Miss will take on Georgia Tech. That'll be 3:30 on ABC. The Ole Miss Rebels traveling to Atlanta to take on Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech beat who? Who was it? Western Carolina? Yeah. On Saturday. So Tech is now 1-1. Ole Miss 2-0. So that'll be interesting. Now here this will be a good game. Penn State travels to the Plains to take on Auburn this coming Saturday. That'll be on the CBS television network. That'll be at 3:30. Penn State, number 22 in the country, taking on Auburn. Last year, Auburn went up to Penn State, to Happy Valley. Penn State won that game. That should be a pretty good game. It'll be, Auburn has played who? Mercer and San Jose State. That'll be an interesting game. Also at 3:30, Vanderbilt and Northern Illinois. Vandy could be 3-1 after that game, going in to take on Alabama. There you go. You go, Vandy. I'm with you. Saturday at 4:00, University of Louisiana at Monroe taking on Alabama on the SEC network. All we can say for UL Monroe is bless your heart. Oh boy, they And what's the thing with the horns down for Texas? Is that like what is that? I just you can't do that or something? Okay, I don't know. Saturday at 6:00, it'll be Mississippi State at LSU. Now that'll be a good game. That'll be on ESPN. That's this coming Saturday. Mississippi State at LSU. Interesting. At 7:00 on the SEC Plus and ESPN Plus, you have Missouri State taking on Arkansas, number 10 ranked Arkansas. 7:00 on Saturday night, you have Akron taking on Tennessee. That'll be on SEC Network Plus and ESPN Plus. What that means is you got to go on the computer to see. Those games are. You got to go on the internet, as my good friend says, to see those games. 7:30 on Saturday, you have South Florida taking on Florida. Florida now ranked number 18 in the country. That'll be on the SEC network. So, what are they, the Bulls? The Bulls of South Florida taking on the Gators of Florida. That'll be at 7:30 on Saturday. And then, here we go again. Saturday at 9 p.m. on ESPN, you have Miami, the University of Miami, 13th ranked team in the country, taking on number 4 Texas A&M in College Station. So Texas A&M will be looking to redeem itself to some extent against a very good Miami team. So, wow, good stuff coming up. Well, that's going to do it for our program tonight. Thank you for jumping in here with us as we talk a little bit about University of Georgia football, excuse me, and more, brought to you by Southeast Mortgage, the official home loan lender of the Georgia Bulldogs. Next time you get ready to finance or refinance your home, take my advice, check out Southeast Mortgage. You can go to southeastmortgage.com/Bulldogs, and you'll find a lot of good information there. And Southeast Mortgage, those are good people, good people. And they will help you to the very best they can to make sure that whatever you're trying to do is going to be done in a good, efficient, and professional way. That's Southeast Mortgage, the official home loan lender of the Georgia Bulldogs. I got my shirt on tonight, too, by the way. Okay, the camera's backwards. There it is, Southeast Mortgage. So be sure to check them out. All right, thank you for being with us here. Dogs on Demand. Check us out, dogsondemand.com. That's dogsondemand.com. We'll join you again very soon, probably for 30 minutes prior to the South Carolina game, halftime of the South Carolina game, and then after the game on Saturday, we'll give you a chance to kind of pipe in there with a little bit of what's on your mind as the Bulldogs take on South Carolina. All of that presented by Southeast Mortgage. Join us again next time. Until then, always remember, go